Lonna Kelly, and this is Hudson Valley Art Speak. Thanks for tuning in today. This evening we're going to be talking to Karen Madden, and Karen's a fiber artist, but she's kind of in a bit of transition into another type of creative endeavor, and I'm going to let Karen tell us about it. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Lonna. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming tonight. So you're still working in fiber, but you also have a whole new thing going on, right?
Yes, I do. It's working with metal and bending metal, welding metal. It just has always interested me, but fiber, because I worked with fiber just naturally, knitting and sewing, growing up with a family of my mother, my grandmother who did that, it was a natural fit that when I wanted to be more artistic, I would migrate to the fiber.
Sure.
But there was always an idea that someday I would like to work with metal.
Yeah.
And my husband decided that one day I should either go ahead and do it or forget about it.
Yeah.
So he got me for my birthday, he got me a class up in at the sculpture park up in Vermont, which is well known for their different types of sculpting, rock, stone, metal. And I went there and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And so I have a problem now because I love doing the fiber, but I love doing the metal too. So.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've really jumped into it though, because you've also have a new studio.
Yes. Well, the problem with metal, unlike fiber, a fiber I could do in my kitchen, my living room, but metal, when you're welding, you really need to have either a dedicated space or outside.
Yeah.
And until the time that we decided to add a little small room or building to the side of Bob's stone studio, I would do the welding outside.
Yeah.
So I would pull my welder out, my grinder and my cutter, which is wonderful unless it was raining, snowing, or very cold.
Yeah.
I could even work in the heat. Last summer I did, but I'd move everything into the shade.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it so much. I have the opportunity now to do that, and we are in the process of building a small welding workshop for me, metal workshop, and I think it's going to turn out really well.
Yeah. So do you feel that the metal work is influenced by the fiber work in any way?
Well, I think what is a basis for both of them and the way I like to create is I love the process. I love the process. In fact, sometimes I consider myself more a process artist. I enjoy learning and then taking what I learn and experimenting with it myself and seeing what I can do with it beyond what I just learned. So yes and no, they're two totally different creations, but they do have that learning curve that I really enjoy, and taking the learning curve and then, going beyond that with creation of the art.
Yeah.
I don't want to give up the fiber because I do enjoy it. It's fun to watch fiber transform into a piece of art.
Some of your more recent work is just amazing.
Of the fiber?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's back about 4 months ago now in January, when I couldn't do anything outside, I just decided to try things. It was also based on someone wanted a piece from me, but she gave me requirements, and that was, instead of framed fiber art, she wanted more free-floating look to it. So I spent a long time trying to figure out how I was going to do it, and then also once it's installed, make it look, doesn't look wrinkled, it doesn't look puckered or anything like that, but yet has a flow to it, a floating appearance to it. And adding different materials to it gave me that that result.
Yeah.
So it's very light. My new pieces are very, very light. But I add silk to them, which is a very light fiber, but it also adds a really interesting texture to it.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Well, you've always kind of played a little bit with metal in your fiber work, with some metal netting and copper pieces in the fiber.
And the reason for that in the fiber is when the fiber felts, the wool felts, it shrinks, but obviously the copper won't, the mesh, the metal mesh doesn't, so it just takes on a puckering look. And in this case, I want that. I want it to start to create these hills and valleys in the piece because it gives it much more of a dimension to it.
Yeah. When you start a metal piece, do you know what your outcome is going to be, or do you just kind of go with
more
it?
so than the fiber, yes.
Yeah.
Much more. And that's mainly because you really, much more than when I did fiber, I have to plan it more. I have to cut the metal in a certain way so it fits together before I weld it. So I have to, and then I have to decide, am I going to be able to weld it? So if I get pieces too close to each other, I can't get the welder in there.
Yeah.
You know, the tip, the electrode. So I have to design the piece a little bit more so than I do with fiber.
Yeah.
Fiber, sometimes I just will throw it out there on the table and start felting it. And it's generally a pleasant surprise at the end.
Yeah. So when I don't know anything about metalworking, and I can't even envision what it is, how you start. So thinking about the sun behind us, the yellow sun, does that start with, say, 6-foot long pieces of yellow metal, and you have to cut them and?
Actually, they're steel colored. They're steel.
Okay.
So they come in lengths. They're not colored at that point.
Yeah.
So I cut them up. I have these really neat metal cutting saws. So I cut them in the lengths for the rays. I'll cut them in the lengths that I want, but they're still straight.
Right.
So I now have a metal bender. You put the metal in there and you use a light, believe it or not, a light touch, but because if it's a more of a leverage to it, it bends.
Yeah.
And then I just bend it in the shapes that I want. I weld them to another plate, another steel plate, and now that creates the sun.
Right.
I have that powder coated. So powder coating is like on your car, you know, it's a very durable coating on it. It'll withstand outside. I've had some of these outside over the winter, and they still come out looking shiny and new.
Yeah.
They don't rust. I add the geode. In this case, I added geodes just to give it a different dimension. You know, so it adds a splash of color or a different dimension to that. Just the color itself would be maybe a little boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the geodes are nice because they're multicolored, really. I mean, they're basic blue, but there's black and lighter colors in it.
Yes, a lot of different colors.
Yeah. What about the heat temperatures? I mean, are you working with very high heat?
Yes, depending on the type of welding. There's 2 different kinds. One that I'm working with now, which I haven't, it concentrates the heat in a very localized area. So yes, I have to wear gloves and protective helmet and such, but it's not spattering molten metal or anything on me. So it's quite safe as long as you have eye protection and hand protection, really.
Right. And where do you get inspiration? What makes you? What brought you toward the suns?
Well, I could envision what they look like. Unlike when I worked with fiber, I liked real abstract types of things. For one thing, it's more difficult to control the fiber. to make it look like a painting or a face or something like that, it's much more difficult to control that.
Yeah.
Whereas with metal, as I said earlier, you cut the pieces and you design the pieces, and what you see before you weld it, that's what you're going to get.
Right.
So there's no surprise.
Right.
So the Suns was, because the very first one I ever made was at this class that I took, we had to go to the junk pile and pick pieces of stuff, of steel out of there and create something. That was, in order to graduate from the class, that's what you had to do. I saw a milk can cover and these brake lines, that's what I was told, and they do the kind of an S shape. So I just stuck those in there around the milk can, and that was my first piece, and it was a sun.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it looked like.
Right.
So to learn welding and metalworking, but yet produce something that was recognizable, went to Suns.
Yeah.
So,
okay. And where do you see this taking you? What do you want ultimately to do with the metalwork?
I'd like to do, actually, I'd like to go back to more abstract art. I like abstract metal art. I want to work in slightly larger sizes than these Suns, but also more freestanding, that could be in a park, in a garden.
Right.
In fact, right now I'm designing to submit for a show, local show that's looking for artwork, not just metal art. And I'm designing a piece that would go outside for 2 months.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking. I want to take it more abstract, but yet durable for outdoors or indoors. You know, one of the things I say, I'll work more with wall hanging type pieces initially, because I can hide my welding. Because welding is an art. It is an art form. So this way I can hide the art form,
any
the mistakes
or something. Yeah.
And it's not structural. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to hold itself up. It doesn't get heavy weight on it or anything like that. So I'm learning at the same time that I'm creating.
Right. You said that welding was a free-forming style of art, and I was wondering what you meant by that.
Well, I can start with something, and then, oh, gee, you know, especially in an abstract mode, I'll just keep adding to it.
Yeah.
So it's an accretive process, as opposed to stone sculpting, which is a reduction.
Right.
I would not be. I don't think I'd be very good at that, because I'd reduce it too far, you know, and I'd end up with just a little structure. Whereas, just like my Sons, the first one, well, gee, it's a little plain, so I'll add a geode to it. I happen to have one that I picked up in Utah on a vacation one time. And I said, wow, that's going to look great there. So that's how I got stuck on that. So it's free floating in that it lets my mind kind of just try different things.
Wander and try new things. Well, Karen, that's all the time we have for tonight.
Thank you very
so
much, Lonna. I really enjoyed it.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.